Hi and Assalamualaikum everyone. In this chapter, I'm going to talk about the component of budgeting. Some of the session outline that we are going to cover are the estimating process, component of cost and profit, direct cost, overhead cost or indirect cost, summary and some further readings. As for the introduction, it is said that the estimating cost in landscape construction project is kind of difficult due to many uncertainties involved. Some of the uncertainties are: will the weather prevent the workers from proceeding at the most efficient rate? These are some information that we are always questioned about when we are doing outside job like a landscape construction project. How long will it take workers to plan the plant materials? So this is also some of the uncertainties that we're facing off when we are doing a site job. And how much concrete is required to build a stone retaining wall? These maybe more are the common variables that must be taken into account in estimation process. These are the four stages in estimating process in landscape construction works: estimating the cost, using the estimate to monitor, making adjustment, and finally recording and using the actual cost. The component of landscape contractors' operations are more difficult to calculate than the cost of many other business operations. The factors to be considered in the determination of costs and profits of landscape contractors include the following. The components of cost and profit in landscape construction costs are the labor cost, the materials cost, the equipment cost, subcontracting cost, overhead expenses, contingencies, and profits. Steps in estimating the cost of and determining the amount to bid for landscape installation contracts includes visiting the site and making notes of the important matters that will affect costs, such as an access and traffic patterns, obtaining drawings and specifications, checking the instruction to bidders for the bid date and the time and place for presentation of the bid, examining the general conditions, special conditions, and specification for unusual terms that might be costly to comply with, making the list of questionable items that require further considerations, and checking time permitted for completion of the job. There are two types of costs: direct costs and indirect costs, or also known as overhead costs. Some of the examples of direct costs are the labor costs, which directly associated to the construction cost. It usually calculated by using the quantities, time required, task, and hourly rate. Second, the subcontracting cost, and it's usually commonly measured by the scope of work. Third is the equipment cost, including machinery and vehicles. It also includes the rental equipment, company-owned equipment, used equipment, and any training if applicable. And the fourth is the material cost, including hardscape and softscape materials. Usually, it also includes the materials delivery to the site. Estimating the labor cost. The labor costs usually are the most important cost and usually the highest cost as compared to the other categories. The most difficult cost to estimate when estimating landscape job because quantities, time requirements, and hourly rates must first be determined. First, task breakdown. The first step is to break the project into separate tasks to make the calculation manageable. Consider the project from beginning to end. Itemize the tasks and generally follow an orderly work sequence. Second, quantities. The next step is to determine quantities of materials required for each task. Third, time required for tasks. Determining is how long various tasks will take. Information sources includes from business cost records, personal experience, time and motion study, cost data book, industry ratios. Fourth, hourly labor rate. Get the hourly labor rate to be used for determining the cost of performing the task. There are three factors in determining the estimation of labor cost. First, commencement and completion dates. The committed date of the commencement and completion of the work are specified in the contract and comprise the overall time constraints for the project. Second, work sequence. The logical and best sequence for the work determines when the various tasks are to be begun and completed. Third, delivery date. The materials required and delivery dates must fit the work sequence, and arrangement should be made for the security of the materials on site. Fourth, accessibility on the site. General access to the site has to be ensured, and access to specific parts of the site must be based on the work schedule. Fifth, subcontractors. The work of subcontractors must conform to the work schedule, and possible problems of availability at the times needed have to be resolved. Sixth, equipment use. The date of each equipment is required to avoid idle work. Crew and equipment are crucial. If the same equipment is required for various tasks, schedule those tasks to be done in sequence. Insofar as possible, will minimize equipment mobilization and demobilization costs. Seventh, bottlenecks. Potential bottlenecks in the completion of the work must be identified and ways to avoid them planned to ensure orderly completion. 8. Relation to preliminary schedule. The preliminary schedule of the work prepared by the estimator is the basis of preparing the final schedule. However, adjustment may have to be made in the cost estimates and the preliminary schedule to reflect negotiated changes or other factors that anticipated when the cost estimates were prepared. Estimating equipment costs. What to be considered? When estimating the equipment and machinery's costs, these are the questions that we are going to ask about. Buying or renting is more economical. Before we start to think of buy or rent the machineries or equipment, these are the consideration points that to look at. First, the rental equipment cost. Is it cheap or expensive that we can afford? Second, company-owned equipment. Some companies have their already owned equipment that we can use again and again. Consider also the acquisition cost, purchase price interest cost, the maintenance cost, the fuel cost of the equipment. Third, used equipment. Some companies will like to go for the second-hand equipment or the third-hand equipment that was still in a good conditions. And the last one is the training. Some of the machineries and equipment will have to have certain training or license to work on the site. So these are the consideration points to consider when we try to think about the buy or rent is more economical. Some other points in renting versus owning is that the general rule is that if a piece of equipment is not used at least 50% of the time, like 20 hours per week on average, or it isn't financially worthwhile for a landscape contractor. The landscape contractor should consider carefully its projected use before buying a piece of equipment. Consideration should also be given to a greater convenience, having it available for use all the time. Sometimes during the busy seasons, rental equipment is not available. And some small tools and non-motorized equipment are usually included in general overhead expenses and not included as part of direct costs for estimating purposes. Some landscape contractors simply include all equipment costs in general overhead costs. This method can create problems for jobs that require a lot of equipment. Landscape contractors recover the cost of equipment they use by including appropriate amounts of these costs in their contracts bid. Estimating material and subcontracting costs. Commonly, there are three-stage procedures in estimating the materials and subcontracting costs. First, materials and subcontractors. Determine from the drawing and specification the materials and subcontracts required. Second, measurement. Determine the quantities required by measuring on the drawings, the size of the improvements for which materials of subcontractors are required, and also consider the specifications for the materials to be used. And the last one is pricing. Ascertain the best prices available from suppliers of subcontractors, usually asking that price remain firm until after the date of bid award. Next is markup. Markup is the difference between the cost of a good or service and its selling price in order to create a profit. Direct costs of materials and subcontracts are subject to markup for overhead and profits. Include the sum of overhead as a separate item so that overhead can be calculated on a predetermined basis. Include a lump sum amount for profits when all costs have been estimated. Estimating overhead costs. Overhead costs or overhead expenses is an indirect cost that are all the expenses for labor, equipment, materials, and services that are not directly incorporated in landscape work, such as the cost to hire the security guard for a project site. And the overhead cost is also the cost that not directly used to incorporate materials in landscape construction work, such as office stationery that also we be using to assist in planning and scheduling work. Generally, we can say that the overhead cost is the indirect cost that is not directly associated in the construction work, but it also will be counted into the budget cost. There are several types of overhead cost. Direct overhead cost, which is directly associated with the production of goods or services, such as for lighting, maintenance, and rent of a business premises. Indirect overhead costs, which are not directly associated with the production of goods or services, such as office expenses, telephone expenses, and research and development. Fixed overhead costs, which are not directly associated with the production of goods or services, such as payroll taxes, unemployment insurance, bid bonds, and licensing. The amounts may change due to fluctuation in the number of bids and the number of labor during a project. The several types of overhead costs can be visualized as on the screen. The first type is direct overhead costs, which are direct job overhead expenses. It includes the temporary offices, equipment rental, administrative salaries such as guard, utilities for the job site. Indirect overhead costs, which is indirect or general and administrative overhead expenses, include utilities bills, insurance, employment taxes, office expenses. And the last is a fixed overhead cost, includes payroll taxes, unemployment insurance, bid bonds, and licensing. In summary, the estimation of construction costs involves many uncertainties that make it difficult to calculate than any other business operations. The two main types of costs in construction work are the direct costs and the indirect costs, or also known as the overhead costs. You may find some of useful further readings here. So with that, I thank you.